point, and he has asked for an extension for 2 months. I think it is September. But he was given 2 months, and he has asked for an extension in September. So Cabinet has agreed to grant him that extension, which would be until September the 16th. I'd just like to call on the Minister of Health, Mr. Terence Singh, to speak to you on the Couva Hospital.
Thank you very much, Minister of Communications, and congratulations to you on your... Thank you very much, Minister of Communications, and congratulations to you on your posting and hosting your first post-cap press conference. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, I would just like to put out into the public domain and for your consumption the facts surrounding the initial phase 1 operationalization of COA and to counter the misinformation and mischief being put out there. Phase 1 of the operationalization of the Couva Medical and Multi-Training Facility began officially on Monday, July 22nd. That is 3 days ago. Phase 1 will have 2 parts to its operationalization. 1, the provision of radiological diagnostic services by referrals from the RHAs. That has begun and that is going smoothly. To date, we have scanned and read and reported up until Tuesday, the latest figure for Tuesday, is 161 patients across all modalities. That is MRIs, CTs, fluoroscopy, mammography, and so on. So that is a major part of the first phase operationalization where we use the equipment. To date, we are now booking into the facility an average of about 40 patients per day for different types of scans. So if up until Tuesday we had 161, by today you would have about 240, 250. And that is the rate that we are going at for the time being. It is going very smoothly, and I'm happy to report that all systems are working. We got the engineers down from Siemens to do all the training and so on. Concurrently, we are also ramping up the pharmacy to provide CDAP medications as we said publicly. In tandem with that, the pharmacists there are also looking after the radiological patients awaiting their scans, advising them on medication, compliance, and so on. Because one of the biggest reasons why our A&Es have a lot of people at times is because people are non-compliant with medication. So contrary to what is being put out there, the Couva facility is not a pharmacy. I just want to correct that and to give you facts for your consumption. That to date, up until Tuesday, 161 patients across all modalities were treated, and we continue with a rate of about 40 patients per day. Thank you very much.
Attorney General.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, members of the listening public, as we, of course, welcome our colleague, the Minister of Communications, to this press conference and to her discharge of duties on behalf of the Cabinet. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you are well aware that the Parliament is in its official recess. There was a change in our standing orders a couple of years ago, and the Parliament was put upon a mandatory recess for the period beginning the second week in July till the end of the first week in September. There is an exception under the standing orders which permits the Parliament to be called back into session for matters which are urgent. You will have noticed the Minister of National Security, the Prime Minister, and the Commissioner of Police speaking to the government's management of serious issues in Trinidad and Tobago surrounding crime. Crime and the battle against crime obviously has an interaction with the law. And the law is set, amended, pruned, bettered by the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. we introduced into the Senate a very important amendment to the bail law of Trinidad and Tobago. And permit me for a moment to just remind you what the bail law of Trinidad and Tobago is as it stands today. First of all, you must remember that in 1994, there was a codification of the bail laws of Trinidad and Tobago. Basically, Attorney General then approached the Parliament, Sobian, said to the Parliament, let us consolidate the bail law. In that bail law, there was an acknowledgement that there are certain offences for which there is no bail. Those offences include murder, treason, etc. When we look to the position after that, there were a series of amendments to the bail laws in Trinidad and Tobago. In particular, in the period 2004 to 2008, there were significant amendments done. And when Trinidad and Tobago was battling with the issue of kidnapping for ransom, the bail laws were amended in a very important way. If you were brought before the court for a charge treating with kidnapping for ransom, you would be denied bail. And when you are denied bail in those circumstances, there were certain caveats, certain exceptions that said you shall be denied bail if you are brought before the court on a charge for anti-kidnapping. In the case where your trial has to go on, the point is, how do you start your trial? Within 120 days, the law said, if you have not had your matter started within 120 days, you can then apply for bail. Further, it went on to say, if your matter started within 120 days, but it was not finished within 1 year, then you can apply for bail again. In effect, what that anti-kidnapping law, as it related to bail, did, is that it allowed the police to apply what we call a cooling off period. And what happened in Trinidad and Tobago in the period 2004 to 2008, 2009, is that kidnapping for ransom went to zero. So the demonstration of how powerful the kidnapping situation occupied Trinidad, how it was treated with by amendments to the Bail Act, can be found in how Trinidad and Tobago managed, through an effective application of bail law, to move kidnapping for ransom down to zero. In 2011, Trinidad and Tobago introduced, under Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, then Prime Minister, a package of law, which was the anti-gang law and the bail amendment law. They were brother bills or sister bills, companion bills. That anti-gang and bail amendment law was passed with the support of a People's National Movement opposition. There was unanimity in that law. The PNM opposition supported an extension of no bail for anti-gang measures in the same 120-day period and 1 year period. There was a sunset law applied, a sunset clause. What does a sunset clause mean? That after the expiry of a particular time frame, in that case 5 years, the law would come to an end unless the Parliament gave it an extension. In 2016, the PNM government came to the Parliament, asked for an extension of the Anti-Gang Act and the Bail Amendment Act to continue no bail provisions for kidnapping for ransom, for gang activity, for raping children, for grievous offences, offences against the person, very serious matters. It's now a matter of history that the opposition did not support the extension of those laws, and therefore the law was allowed to collapse. That means that our law now stands as it did with respect to bail, similar to the 1994 law, as there was 2 small amendments that applied. But effectively, we reversed history. In 2016, we really collapsed all of the anti-crime measures that were found in the Bail Act. They collapsed back down essentially to what the law looked like in 1994. There were a few small amendments to that. Importantly, we came back to the Parliament. We had to fight for the introduction of anti-gang law. That anti-gang law, you're well aware of what happened with that. It was only under extreme governmental and societal pressure that the opposition eventually agreed to reintroducing anti-gang law. We took the bail amendments to the Senate of Trinidad and Tobago. And in battling with the Senate, we introduced very powerful amendments to the Bail Act. The amendments to the Bail Act were debated in the Senate. The independent bench supported the amendments because these amendments require a 3/5 majority for support. The independent bench agreed with the government, and the amendments to the Bail Act were carried into success by the Senate. It is material to note that the opposition bench, led by Senator Wade Mark, Senator Saddam Hussein, they refused to support the bail amendments. The bail amendments passed by the Senate make sense of the existing Bail Act. And I'll put it very simply to you. What the bail amendments passed by the Senate say are important for battling crime at the present position. Number one, it says, lightning does not strike twice by mistake. What do I mean by that? In this bail amendment, if you come before the court with a serious offense set out in the law to include things like kidnapping, trafficking in narcotics, if it includes possession of a firearm or using a firearm in offenses against the person or other ways, if you come before the court and you have a charge against you for one of those matters, and you find yourself on bail, but you come back on a second occasion, in other words, then the lightning has now struck you twice. You come back before the court for a similar matter listed on another occasion, then you will not have access to bail with a certain careful safeguard applied to that. We go one step further. We say if you have a conviction for one of these matters listed in the schedule, and you find yourself back before the court with a charge for one of these matters, and we single out firearm possession in this law, then you ought to be denied bail. Ladies and gentlemen, this law has an important safeguard. In the case where we talk about the charge matter, we have two forms of safeguards. Number one, we asked the Senate, and the Senate independent bench agreed that this law should have a sunset clause. This law is proposed to last for 3 years from its proclamation. Secondly, as a safeguard, in the charge matters, where lightning has struck you twice with charges for serious matters, we say no bail. We apply the 120-day start rule. We say after 1 year, you can approach the court if your matter is not finished. We make an exception for people who are treating with children in gang-related matters. But importantly, the safeguard that we refer to is the one where we say in exceptional circumstances for charge matters, you can approach the court and ask the court to consider why you should be granted bail. In other words then, we reverse the burden and put it upon the person who lightning has struck twice, the person who has come before Trinidad and Tobago's court twice, to explain why bail should be granted. This law provides a fighting chance for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. This law, as it was passed in the Senate with the support of the independent bench, now goes to the House of Representatives. The leader of government business has asked for the House of Representatives to be convened. We do so on Wednesday of next week. We have one item on the table. This one item is the bail amendment. The law as it stood between 1994 straight up until 2016, that law was good enough to stand on the books of Trinidad and Tobago with by far more draconian provisions than we ask for now. We then, as an opposition, supported the then government under Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, and we passed that into law. That law was used successfully to wrestle a number of matters, the most important of which you can see a success marker for is the kidnapping for ransom, which went to 0. We thought it fit today to inform the population of the reason for the reconvening of the Parliament. We've noted the observations in the public domain, the comments made by the opposition which say that they don't think that this is necessary or it will not have effect. What we ask the population to have a view of is the fact that this law operated very successfully when we were treating with kidnapping for ransom, and this law operated and was in effect in a more draconian way for the entire time that Mrs. Prasad Bisesa acted as Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I will reserve your questions until after the Minister of National Security has spoken, and then we can take questions in the round. Thank you.
Thank you, AG. Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Senator Cox, and welcome to the Ministry of Communications. It's good to have you on board. Good afternoon, members of the media. Just to basically pick up from a national security perspective on where the Honorable AG has just left off, I can tell you all that the law is being asked for by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service are the ones who have asked us and knocked on our door. They didn't need to knock too hard. Immediately we recognize the benefits of this law as a tool in the toolbox for law enforcement, and that's what we're going to deal with. There are a couple items that I'd like to raise from a national security perspective here this afternoon. The first is, I understand, and I was actually called out of Cabinet a short while ago this afternoon, and I have just been given a quick report on it, that the Ministry of National Security's website, as well as Immigration's website, were hacked. There are currently investigations with respect to where this hacking could have taken place from, and we have shut down the websites, as you would imagine, until we're able to secure them and understand what, if anything, has happened. I'd like to assure the public that there is no real damage done. These websites don't get into our operating systems. These websites are not going to affect the records at National Security, certainly not the records at Immigration either. So there is no reason for us to be overly concerned about intentional attack on data that exists in those two very important places. Well, National Security and the Division of Immigration, which is a division of National Security. The second issue I'd like to raise is there seems to all of a sudden be a lot of conversation about the registration cards for the Venezuelans. You all would recall that when we had announced the registration process and when we were giving updates on the registration process, and certainly at the end of the registration process, myself and others had made it very clear what the process would be once we had completed the physical registering of persons. As you all know, is 16,523 Venezuelans that were registered. I then on another occasion gave the breakdown. Out of that is about 2,300 children. We're giving registration cards to persons who are over the age of 16. We had also always indicated that after registering, before we gave out the registration cards, we must perform due diligence. That is the exercise that has been going on. As you are aware, due diligence means that we have to go via information to Venezuela to find out, one, if persons are in fact Venezuelans. There were a number of people who had no passports, no identification card, etc. So part of the due diligence is to verify that persons are who they say they are, and they are Venezuelans. There's then also a security element of that verification. I'm happy to say that we have completed it, and we are beginning the rollout process of the distribution of registration cards tomorrow. So there is absolutely no need for anxiety. I had approved the type of registration card. Tomorrow, when we launch the registration card and begin the registration process, we will point out some of the security features. We procure the equipment to be able to print these cards ourselves to reduce cost. We are going to have a specific security barcode, the person's photograph, the Minister of National Security's signature, a specific PIN number, an identification number per registration card. The distribution begins tomorrow. There are a number of questions that were asked. For example, whether there would be a cost to the Venezuelans for this card. The answer is no. If the cards are lost, what happens? It's the same thing like if you lose your driver's permit, or you lose your passport, or your identification card. We expect anyone who loses their registration card to report it to the police, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and then a determination would be made. we are also asking Venezuelans, when you're given your registration card, please make sure and have it with you on your person at all times. When you're in public, please carry your registration cards with you at all times, because this is how we, the authorities, are going to identify whether you're a registered Venezuelan or not. And we've made it abundantly clear throughout, whoever is not registered, once we've completed the registration process, the normal laws of Trinidad and Tobago apply to you. I was also asked to provide an update with respect to visas. When we announced that the visa system was in place, again, visas are nothing new to Trinidad and Tobago, our issuance of visas. So visa, we had it online, there was an online system. You've not heard any set of complaints within the past few weeks with respect to the visas, and that is because the system is operational and we are considering visa applications. This is immigration, and they're granting visas as they see fit. So that's it with respect to the registration. You all, I'm sure, will be invited sometime tomorrow afternoon. I'll confirm that once I get out of here with the immigration authorities and national security authorities for the commencement of the distribution of these cards. It will take some time because it's going to be at least 13,000 odd cards to be distributed. The last item that I'd like to discuss before we go into the question segment is with respect to the fishermen. All right, these fishermen who unfortunately were the victims of heinous crimes on the high seas 2 days ago. There is a lot of misinformation going on, and misinformation by certain persons who have no access to information. So, for example, Mr. Aboud, Gary Aboud, and Fishermen and Friends of the Sea, I heard him myself on the media this morning and had to call in and correct him. First point, as soon as the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard were alerted to the fact that there were incidents at sea, which was at about 3 a.m. on the 23rd of July, immediately crews were manned and the vessels slipped, that's the term that they use, from the shorings at Stobels Bay and were sent straight to site. During the course of the day, we also had aerial cover. We used our fixed-wing aircraft, which is the airplane that we have, the C-26 aircraft. They were part of the search and rescue operations. We also utilized National Helicopter Services helicopters in our search efforts as well. Unfortunately, as at this moment, I've been informed that out of the 7 individuals, I believe 4 bodies have been found, or maybe even 5 bodies, and we're still searching for the remaining 2. This is a great tragedy. We've also able to confirm at this stage, as you all know, that it was locals who carried out these attacks on other citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. The local criminal element are the ones who carried out these attacks on these fishermen who were going about their trade. I want to make sure that citizens understand that despite all of the noise from those out there who are really mischief makers and have no facts, that at National Security we deployed as much of the assets as we had available out on the maritime, out on the seas, as well as in the airspace, to be able to try and locate these unfortunate fishermen who were the victims of the most heinous of crimes. I can assure you that the police service, we had a bit of some luck. They were able to locate the engines, and that commenced an investigation in the sea lots area, and they have been pursuing their investigations. And at the appropriate time, I am sure that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service will tell the country the various links that have been made. I just want to give the population here this afternoon the assurance that from the word go, we did utilize our sea assets as well as the air assets available to us. And when we didn't have, we also used the National Helicopters Services, because of course, you know, we don't have the rotator aircraft, the helicopters anymore available to the Air Guard. But we have one with Ministry of National Security. We've also utilized that, and in fact utilized that in an operation this morning as well. So members of the public, through you members of the media, we give the assurance that all of our citizens are important to us at National Security. And immediately upon becoming aware of this most tragic circumstance, we did deploy all of the assets. I've seen it suggested that the Coast Guard couldn't get involved because they had no fuel. There was no fuel for the helicopters, no fuel for the plane. Complete disinformation, not true, false. and we did do all that we can. And I would like to take the opportunity as the Minister of National Security to sincerely send my condolences to the families. It is a traumatic time. It is a very difficult time for any family that loses a loved one in these types of circumstances. It certainly does affect me as an individual, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. Every single loss of life of one of our law-abiding citizens in Trinidad and Tobago affects me as the Minister of National Security, but firstly as a citizen. So my heartfelt sympathy goes out to those families who are affected, and I give them the assurance that we did deploy as much of our assets as we had available in this search and rescue operation. Thank you. I think we'll take questions at this stage.
Thank you.
Go down to commiserate with these families because it's nine families have been affected by this.
I think you know the answer to that no member of the cabinet has personally gone down there to commiserate with the families. At the end of the day, the responsibility come in various tiers. So as a member of the cabinet, as a Minister of National Security, where I have the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard through the Defence Force, the Police Service and these other arms, there's very little that I can do apart from ensure that they're aware of it, keep asking them for reports, keep pushing them to get the men and women out there and to do the search and rescues that they in fact did.
There was an early morning execution this morning in Las Cuevas. The midday news reported that the killers wore police uniforms. Can you shed some light on that?
This morning, what took place in Las Cuevas, as you all are aware, took place at someone who there are many allegations of criminal activity, that they're involved in criminal activity. I certainly have not been privy to the information that you have just said that they use police uniforms. The initial reports that came in is that they could have been using dark colored uniforms or even the suggestion of camouflage. When I leave here, I'm going for a full briefing. So certainly at this stage, I am not aware of the use of police uniforms, but what I was aware of is that the perpetrators who attacked the residents, the premises, did in fact dress themselves in a sort of, I don't want to call it military fatigue manner. I wasn't sure whether it's camouflage or, as you know, there are also other types of uniforms that give this sort of special forces.
Do you expect
Just
repercussions?
these are.
Should the population be?
I don't think the population needs to be overly concerned. Of course, with these types of activities, and I was very careful to say these are criminal-related activities. In fact, one of the persons suspected then turned up at the St. James Infirmary a few hours later and is currently under police guard, and they're dealing with that. I'm allowing the police to do their investigations. It's obviously at a very sensitive stage. The police were on the scene very shortly thereafter. We have other operatives in as well. The population just needs to continue to be careful. But no, we're not expecting, but of course you can't predict with any level of certainty that there's going to be anything that affects our law-abiding citizens. But I can assure you that we do have a net of cover, and this is being looked at, and as I say, I'm going to get a briefing at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. So one at a time.
Sorry, there's a theory that it was linked to the situation with the fishermen and the boat.
As I said a short while ago when I was speaking about the fishing vessels that were stolen on the high sea, at the appropriate time, I will leave the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to address these issues. I think we're at a very preliminary stage. This is a sensitive stage of a live investigation where there seem to be a number of murders committed by the criminal elements in society. And let the police complete their investigation, and I'm sure they will provide us, the population, with the necessary information at the appropriate time. Jewel?
So your message to those beachgoers, families and so on who will be thinking of going to both Las Cuevas and Maracas this weekend in light of what happened, your message would be what, sir?
My message would be continue as normal with your activities. The residence of this person who was murdered this morning is not on the Las Cuevas beach itself. I am sure that the police service will, if they believe there's a need, provide extra patrols on those beaches this weekend. In fact, I will raise it. I undertake to raise that with the police service when I meet with them later this afternoon. But as at this stage, and understand I am not fully privy to everything, at this stage, I don't think there's any reason to panic and not go to Maracas and Las Cuevas this weekend, but it will be raised with the police service.
Can I just add something into this, please? Because what we're talking about today is all interrelated. The government sought and already issued the notice to go back to Parliament. This bail amendment targets people on charge. Many of the people that are the subject of police scrutiny are in fact on charges. Not that this law is ad hominem, meaning targeted to any one individual, but a law like this improves your chances. I can tell you that the Prime Minister sat in with Minister of National Security, Commissioner of Police, Minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General, and we have had ongoing working targets to how we treat with gang activity and other affairs, which will be made public in due course. But what the Minister is referring to today, there are serious connections. What we're doing is we must let the police speak to the issues that the police must speak to. Our job is to create the structure for them to have a better fighting chance. And therefore, what we're talking about now is directly related to improvements such as bail. That's how the anti-kidnapping measures took root. You had kidnapping for ransom. You needed to have cooling off stations to allow the police a fighting chance. And that's why the police commissioner has been calling, as the minister told us, for the bail amendments. That's the urgency of getting back to Parliament.
All right, let's take...
To the anti-kidnapping success, we had the passage of the anti-gang bill, and there has been
All right, let me deal with that, Ria. That is actually very untrue. I've addressed this on multiple occasions again. I'll address it before and I'll address it again. There have been successful charges under the anti-gang legislation with a particular gang. The anti-gang legislation was not retroactive. So with the passage of it, everything that you had before is not evidential. You then needed to build it out. I have said repeatedly, in particular over the last few weeks, have some patience. The police have been doing a significant amount of work under the anti-gang legislation, along with our intelligence services. You must convert information and intelligence into evidence, then go for charges. And the police have been consulting with the Director of Public Prosecutions, and we will see the results of that work in a short time frame. Nothing more should be said about that at this point in time.
The General spoke about linkages. 2 days ago, the Prime Minister gave a very lucid and expansive analysis of linkages between government finances and gangs. What was missing from the Prime Minister's analysis was exactly what is the government going to do about that linkage.
We will be making that public very shortly. There's a very specific working group, including the Commissioner of Police, the AG, the Minister of National Security, the elements of the National Security Council, and that is very high on the agenda with a very specific target.
Would that include, if you could say, a change in how the contracts are awarded in these
Strategy
programs?
is not strategy if everybody knows what the strategy is. The mischief having been identified, the problem being known, the last thing we want to do here today, ladies and gentlemen, is to inform the world how to avoid something.
If there's a policy in place to guide you in operating with the gangs, this isn't strategy like a campaign.
Well, what was just asked, Ria, was not the general version of what you just said, because yours is a remark, not a question. What was asked was a very specific question in respect of which we can't yet speak. But what we can tell you is that there's a very dedicated team. The Minister of National Security has already referred to the need to have a certain amount of patience. He's holding back on telling you more. Let me put it bluntly. He is holding back on telling you more. That should tell you there are significant things in the works, and at the appropriate time, it will be revealed. It is important that we work with anxious scrutiny We have anxious scrutiny on issues, and we work with alacrity or speed on certain things. There's some things you just can't see. But the point is, the population has said quite correctly what the Minister of National Security has been saying all the time, what the Prime Minister has been saying. We need results. And the results are foremost in our minds as to how we treat with this issue.
Surely,
Mr. Attorney General.
Second.
The Downtown Owners and Merchants Association put out a statement via social media that they have fear that of violence in East Port of Spain. Do you have any information with regard to that?
Well, the information I have is just before going into cabinet, it began circulating. It was sent to me. I immediately sent it on to the Commissioner of Police, asked for verification. I understand the concern, again, of Mr. Aboud and wearing now another Aboud wearing a different hat of a different body. And the police, I think, have told you all, in particular the Besor Street Police Station, have said that that suggestion was not particularly true this morning. So there was no one walking around with a number of firearms, openly brandishing firearms this morning. My understanding is that thereafter, Mr. Aboud can speak for himself. When he was confronted on it, he said he felt that he just had a need to warn persons of what has taken place in that area. The police have said, the Besor Street Police in particular, who are the jurisdiction for that area, have said that there is no open gang warfare taking place in those areas. And I will again leave the police service to provide us with further particulars on it.
Mr. Attorney General, we were speaking about the Prime Minister's comments during the Cardinals Police Station's third turning. He also spoke about Venezuelans as well too, and the issues with refugee legislation. And the impression he gave was that we are satisfied with what is in place, and there seems to be no need to bring any legislation. I just wanted to clarify, is that the policy? Are we not going to see, and not just refugee legislation specific to Venezuelans, but just in general?
Well, you just spoke about two completely different things. So the latter point is on legislation, I assume, to treat with the Venezuelan issue.
No, that's specifically refugee legislation.
Right, okay. Yeah. Specifically on refugee legislation, we've answered a number of questions in the Parliament on this, and we have spoken publicly about this. The matter of legislation of this type involves a multi-sectoral coordination. If you were to bring the legislation onto your local books, you have to have certain things in place. You have to have the ability to underwrite or support or facilitate in terms of priority housing, priority education, priority services, medical. You have to have the ability to foster that. Secondly, it means that you're giving a guaranteed right of access to all persons who find themselves in that bracket. You need to remember that a number of countries, a vast number of countries, particularly in our region, have not signed on to that law yet. Whilst you may have been a signatory to conventions and protocols, to make it law in our country, you have to bring it through the Parliament and make an act of Parliament. In the meanwhile, we have a very strong and good working relationship with the UNHCR, with a number of NGOs. There are a number of bodies spread between the AG's office and the Ministry of National Security and others that work together. In fact, I can tell you that up to last week, I had meetings, as I believe my colleague Minister Young had, with the representatives of the UNHCR. We've met with the International Red Cross. We met with the United States Secretary of State, certainly I did, on this issue. All of them have said to Trinidad and Tobago, job well done on treating with economic migration and on treating with the situation of the Venezuelan crisis. They have all said, job well done. Is that job completed? No, it's not. Obviously, the data from the registration exercise has to be filtered. At that point, you can assess what legislatively you need to do or what structurally you need to do. But the only people in Trinidad and Tobago who are telling us that the job was not done correctly are the people in the UNC. So we don't associate ourselves with their sentiments. They believe that if Trinidad and Tobago is in trouble, they prosper. We accept that that's their political purpose. But I can say with certainty, being the person who spoke, at least as to my end of the equation, the AG's end of the equation, with representatives of the UNHCR, Secretary of State coming out of the United States of America, the International Red Cross, many other international organizations and states, the echo coming from them is job well done. I'll end by telling you this on this point. Coming from the representatives that we last spoke to, they said that Trinidad and Tobago now stands as a model jurisdiction on how to do it right. Aruba and Curacao are now looking to what we did. They are being facilitated by the UNHCR and other teams. So whilst some people in this country opposed to the government spread negative talk and constantly move the milestones, the rest of the international world is now saying to us, you, Trinidad and Tobago, stand as a model jurisdiction in this arena, and we're looking to replicate what you have done. And I compliment my colleagues and all of us that have participated, including the NGO sector, on that.
I want to just follow this too. You said that 13,000 odd registration cards are to be distributed, but you said earlier that about 16,000 plus were registered. So
and I also said in between there are 2,300 children. And I also said in between there that we're only giving registration cards to persons over the age of 16. So it's a rough mathematics. 16,523 registered, including babies, right? Because remember there was a suggestion that we didn't register children. Untrue. So that is how I came up with those figures. So everyone who's registered over the age of 16 and have passed our due diligence will be given their registration cards.
Say, if you have that information, that what number may not have obtained cards.
Well, it will be two categories of persons. It will be persons who are under the age of 16, as well as those who haven't passed the due diligence, and I don't have those statistics with me here. Maybe by tomorrow we'll be able to provide that.
Question for the Minister of Health. You spoke about Cuba. You did not say how many medical and non-medical staff are employed at Cuba. And then a broader question is, the government is in the process of constructing a number of hospitals. The question is, where is the funding to staff and equip those hospitals going to come from? And is there an estimate of what it's going to cost the government to run Point Fortin and Arima and Sangre Grande and Port of Spain as well?
Thank you. So my presentation here today was to put information out as to what we are doing for patients. The Cuba facility, we are ramping up the radiological services. I go there every Tuesday. The employment for those services come under the banner of the North Central RHA. They are the operator of first instance. So they are employing consultants, they are employing radiologists, clerical staff, and that whole suite of staffing. The numbers, if I had to guess, there is probably about 50 for now, give or take, right? The other question that you asked, the Point Fortin Hospital and Arima, we have already done the HR requirements. Those will go to the Ministry of Finance for the 2020 budget, and that will be incorporated into that budgetary allocation. The increased funding for both Sangre Grande and Point Fortin is going to be marginal. Why? Because you are moving from a 39-bed facility in Point Fortin to a 100-bed. It's not to say it's a whole new hospital. So you already have existing staff. You will have to ramp up your staffing to facilitate the increased capacity from 39 beds, which is the old Shell Hospital built in the 1930s, which we currently use, to the new facility. Similarly for Sangre Grande. So the increased funding is not going to be significant for Sangre Grande, nor is it going to be that significant for Point Fortin. We will require additional funding for Arima. That's a 150-bed facility, brand new. That is not replacing anything, as opposed to Point Fortin or Sangre Grande. And all those numbers will be forwarded to the Ministry of Finance for allocation in the new budget. I can't give you those costs now. I don't want to put costs out there into the public domain as yet. Those figures are being worked out now and will be sent to the Ministry of Finance.
Long hospital.
What about it?
what's the plan for it?
That
Does the government have a plan for the
Yes,
Augustus Long
yes, the
Hospital?
government does have a plan, and the Minister of Energy answered that in the Parliament and answered that in the public domain and has said categorically and clearly and publicly that the Augustus Long Hospital will be put up for sale to anyone who would like to purchase it.
You mentioned, well, you're talking about this is the first phase
Yes.
of the Couva Hospital. Just remind us briefly
Sure.
what the other phases are, the timelines.
I would love to. So the first phase will run from Monday, 22nd July up until December of this year. Cabinet last week approved a capital expenditure program to bring in equipment for phase 2, which will be dialysis services, vitreoretinal services, and catheterization lab services, with an emphasis on getting those services up for medical tourism, especially the vitreoretinal services, which is eye surgery, and the catheterization services, which is your angioplasty services and so on, with an eye to medical tourism. The Couva Hospital has been mandated by Cabinet to be a revenue-generating facility, and we are working towards that mandate to have it self-sustainable in about 3 to 4 years. So we have a clearly defined pathway to bring Couva facility as a new paradigm into how we develop our medical institutions. And hopefully the best practice there will then filter out into the general public health system. Yes, sir.
Has any report come to you concerning the MCRJ in particular, any senior official being approached by police concerning any fraud investigation?
Not to my knowledge. That rumor has been making the rounds about a month now, so you're a bit late. But I have had nothing. If there's any report, take it to the police, please.
Sir, thanks. Permission, if everybody's finished with the health minister. My question is to the AG. The Netflix has just released their great hack about the Cambridge Analytica, and I'm reading from your statement to Parliament last year, and you talk about the project allegedly conducted in 2013. When you look at that clip, they talk about using the Do So campaign, Percy Villafana. That was in 2010. So is it that Cambridge Analytica was actually in Trinidad long before we even knew about it in 2013? And this, I mean, we've essentially been data mined for close to a decade now without knowing it.
Let me perhaps reveal something for the first time today publicly. Trinidad and Tobago, through its attorneys at law, have been in contact with Mr. Christopher Wiley on several occasions, and we have been in active discussions. Mr. Wiley is obviously somebody now of international significance. He constituted evidence, he brought evidence before the United States Senate Committee and through the House of Commons in their committee as well. His evidence was received into those committees under the privileges of committees. In other words, then, criminal and civil liability was avoided because it was done through a parliamentary process. It is also a matter of public record that we too have a parliamentary committee sitting to treat with Cambridge Analytica. It's in fact chaired by Minister Hines. We have had discussions via appropriate channels to bring home the evidence on Cambridge Analytica. This is no small measure. It's something which has to be done very carefully. Mr. Wiley's attorneys, in writing to ours, have indicated his willingness to assist Trinidad and Tobago in identifying in open form the culprits behind Cambridge Analytica, who are culprits who sat in the last government structure. Let me repeat that. There is an ongoing process where an international whistleblower whose evidence was brought before the UK House of Commons and the United States Senate, and whose evidence featured as well recently in the award of a $5 billion US claim finding itself into a successful claim against Facebook. Trinidad and Tobago features as the genesis of Cambridge Analytica. In the period while Mrs. Prasad Bisesa was the Prime Minister of this country, Netflix is now sending out its program, its completed product to the world at large. The government is engaged in a joint select exercise chaired by Minister Hines. The Office of the Attorney General has for the last year and a half been engaged with attorneys at law for Mr. Wiley. And the only people in this country who swear it didn't happen live in the United National Congress. This is just an update for you in a frame. There will be more to be said when it is appropriate to say so, and we can provide details then.
Is he going to provide testimony? Is he going to come and testify before JSC?
Those dynamics are being worked out. Obviously, this is not just small stakes. This is very large stakes with international repercussions in multiple jurisdictions in the United States, in the United Kingdom. I can tell you now publicly, I myself attended the National Crime Agency in the United Kingdom and sat together with law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, the Department of Justice, the British various departments of justice, Serious Crime Office, etc., the Information Commissioner. We had a full participatory meeting on this matter in the United Kingdom.
So if they are saying they are part of the Do So campaign, and the bulk of the Do So campaign was in 2010, is it that they essentially would have helped Kamala Prasad?
I think you'd want to ask Mrs. Prasad Bisesa these questions. Yeah, no, well, obviously, I wear the hat speaking now as the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago. I have, for a matter of propriety, not told you what I just told you for 1 year and a half, because discharge of office must be carefully exercised. What you want to do now, I think, respectfully, is to put this to Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, put it to the original Rodney Charles himself, put it to the Project Icons team, put it to the people that participated in our team. If I'm not mistaken, Minister Young also mentioned the participation of Gregory Bisesa in that matter. That's a matter of public record, members of the media. This is not small news. This is big news. And again, we feature in the middle of this, in the genesis of this equation, under the hand of those who were last in government.
Backward, what, I mean, having said all that happened in 2010, what have we done or put in place to protect the electoral process?
Let me answer that. And first of all,
what happened already,
okay, well, Ria, today I'd like to respectfully say, I didn't say just so voluntarily all that happened in 2010. I was asked a question which took me to 2010, and in the Facebook award against Facebook of $5 billion, well, they certainly went back to 2010. The point is they had evidence to act upon. Our evidence will come, if it does, there's many a slip between cup and lip, our evidence will come via testimony from somebody who will blow that whistle. I'm now answering the future, Ria. I have to put it in context because I didn't just come to the microphone and say this. It is also a matter of public record. Number one, that we brought whistleblowing protection legislation. That was voted down by the UNC. Number two, there is a most critical piece of law in the Senate. It is the Evidence Amendment Bill. That law is dynamite to this issue and to the life of every witness in every crime. Witnesses are being gunned down in this country, have been for years, and the Evidence Amendment Bill introduced something called anonymous witness evidence. Anonymous witness evidence means that Trinidad and Tobago will have the chance, like the United Kingdom, like the United States, other jurisdictions, to have trials proceed where a witness can be protected from identification. And if you want to know about go forward, there's one other very important product, and that includes the cybercrime legislation. The one entity that has stood most strongly against that cybercrime legislation for the 7 or 8 years that it has been in discussion is the Media Association. As to its part, because it's an important observation by the Media Association. I don't mean to be pejorative, but it concerns also whistleblowing via the media. And the question is, who is a journalist and what are the boundaries? So the Media Association is quite correct to flag the issue, but other countries have passed law like that. So in summary, the go forward is whistleblowing protection, evidence amendment bill, cybercrime legislation, and then actually using your parliamentary processes to deliver this information under the cover of privilege pursuant to Section 55 of the Constitution. Yes, it's been partially proclaimed, and the rest of it is being proclaimed as we work it out.
Okay, we've recognized a few persons. We just want to get some persons who have not spoken as yet, okay? And
Parliament sitting next week. Was that brought on because of the recent upsurge in homicides?
The Parliament session this week was brought on because of a very important resonance. The country has been saying, let's put all hands at work. Let's bring all effort together. Obviously, we brought this legislation since the beginning of this year. We debated it in the Senate, etc. We now have, in light of some elements of the media joining what we've been saying, because let me put it in a different way. We consider that the public agitation is important to listen to. We consider that hearing from the society as a whole, which says, parliamentarians, please do your part, could be listened to, and therefore we think it appropriate to bring this during the vacation period now. Sorry?
The Guardian editorial.
Not at all. The Guardian editorial came subsequent to the bill being laid almost a year ago. The Guardian editorial has been silent on the need for whistleblowers being protected, silent on the need for anonymous witness evidence, silent on the need for bail in the manner in which I described it today, silent on the need. Well, campaign finance reform, we've announced already that draft is going to go to cabinet. We will keep our commitments. So let's not get confused here. Look at our agenda and what we have said. And what I will say to the Guardian, welcome to the real world in doing your part, in assisting us as a country to move forward. We welcome your entry into the arena. A little bit late at times, but we welcome it nonetheless. Marijuana legislation, that draft is nearly fully completed. I can give you a quick update to that. That law will be laid. Once Cabinet approves it in the form that I've brought it, I make the recommendations to Cabinet. That will be laid at the sittings of Parliament in September. The draft is completed. We worked on it up to yesterday in its near completed form.
Another question for Minister Young. Minister Young, you did announce at the opening where the sword turning for the Carnage Police Station, a plan for attorneys from the DPP's office to assist with law enforcement and working in the concept of like the district attorneys in the United States or the Crown Prosecutorial Office in the UK. Does that require any sort of amendment to existing law? And in terms of the reports we've heard of a lack of resources at the DPP's office, how do you then address that in the context of this new plan?
As I had said at that sword turning ceremony, I had had a preliminary discussion with the Director of Public Prosecutions the evening before. It is actually just an administrative decision that needs to be taken, and he was quite prepared to do it. He pledged his full support, and what it is an officer or officers from the DPP being assigned that when investigations are going on, they can walk the police investigators through the process of the gathering of evidence, telling them, look, you need to go and look for this, you need to look for that, etc. Exactly as you've just said, district attorneys and the Crown Prosecution Service does in the United Kingdom. The DPP's office has been working with the Office of the Attorney General in terms of getting further resources. Last I heard is a lot of the problem with the appointment or the lack of appointment of further attorneys to the DPP's office is because we're waiting on the Public Service Commission to do its job and to get that done.
Just let me give a small bit
The
of
Judicial
clarification
and
on
Legal
that.
Services Commission, sorry.
Just want to let you know this. The DPP Tobago office has been opened. The DPP San Fernando office at Gulf City is about to be outfitted. Today, the cabinet considered the outfitting of the DPP North office. All of the legal officers in the lowest category, nearly all of them have been filled up to 95% by the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. The gap in between, in the officers 2, 3, and then senior officers, that is being worked upon by the DPP's recommendation for promotions. Secondly, the public, the district attorney type arrangement, which is prosecutors working alongside investigators, because the DPP works alongside investigators, that has been allowed to prosper now only because Commissioner Griffith took the advice of the cabinet and introduced a special prosecutorial unit in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. So having 42 forensic auditors and accountants and specialist prosecutors from the United Kingdom who are in Trinidad and Tobago at work right now come into the TTPS allows for the DPP's office to have a little bit more space to operate in a better operation. All of these are elemental pieces of making it work. It's the same administrative adjustment that we're doing, which has caused us to birth a public defenders division. That office has been secured, it's on Stanmore Avenue, and it's being built out as we speak.
So in terms of legislation,
No legislation required. This is administrative functioning. We did not introduce legislation for public defenders. We just adjusted the legal aid and advice authority. You see, you needed to think outside the box. And we will connect these issues and demonstrate how they work together, which is, I think, why Minister Young says it so best. Hold on just a little bit longer. We understand the battle is hard. We understand the anxiety, but we give our best effort and undertaking, and we will demonstrate it.
Yeah. Attorney General, did I hear you correctly saying 42 forensic auditors are here from the United Kingdom?
I've said it 100 times, not only from the United Kingdom. There's a combined product between certain divisions of the DPP's structure and also the Trinidad and Tobago structure, and they are at work.
Okay, so the question is...
And forgive me, I don't have the exact number. We're anywhere between, somewhere in the up to 40 zone.
Right, so the question is, I would imagine that after a period in which there were 24 murders in 7 days, that there would be people in the society who would say, let's implement the law of capital punishment. What is the government's position on that?
Well, that is the law at present. The question is the carrying out of the death sentence. So the law has been implemented. People are sentenced to death all the time. The inability to hang people is because of the inability on two ends. One, the transmission of paperwork inside the system, the movement of the file to the Court of Appeal, the reasons the appellate function is delayed by paperwork and processing. And two, the time frame to meet Pratt and Morgan, which is 5 years, is therefore frustrated. Obviously, there's a common sense solution to that. Make the paper move faster, make the appeals happen faster. You can't do that unless you have more DPP offices, more bodies, more courts, and you take out the weeding. And let me put that into context for you now. That's why we created a criminal division. That's why we will have certain announcements coming shortly. That's why the computerized environment in the courts are going live in September for the first time. That's why masters of the court have been hired. That's why we've added 5-to-1 ratio support for judicial officers. That's why we've implemented criminal proceedings rules. That's why we have brought white-collar offenses into anti-gang. That's why the marijuana law is delayed. Because we're not looking at only decriminalizing marijuana. What about convictions and charges? How do you treat with those in the system? Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a half-baked thought process. You have to connect the dots and make it happen quickly. And we will give a fulsome account of how all of those pieces work together. But we're mindful of the fact people want to see the product. Enough talk. And that's why when Minister Young tells you, respectfully, hold on, there are things to come, he is holding back. I know what he wants to say. and I know why he can't say it yet. It's the same thing with me.
Well, what I want to ask is, what would you say to the families of fishermen in general? Because we are seeing a new dimension, especially since these were locally generated crimes. And it's a whole new ballgame, it seems, that people going out to the sea now have to look for elements within the local sector who are. What would you say to
Well, first of all, I'd like to correct the misconception that this is new. Unfortunately, it is not new. Fishermen have been, legitimate fishermen have been the subject of criminal activity for a very long time. One of the things that we're looking at implementing, and I've spoken to Minister Ambarat about it, we had further discussion about it, is GPS tracking systems. In there, the AG is telling me we're preparing, he has the legislation prepared, so it should pass through the LRC, etc. But GPS tracking, that will help. Also, I started off, before coming to Cabinet this morning, you put GPS tracking systems into the boats, so therefore, and it's registered, so therefore we know what's going on. I can tell you, another thing I'll use the opportunity to correct is our radar system. Our radar system is fully functional, it is operational, it is working very well. In fact, I met with the person from Israel who services this part of the region and was the person who sold the radar system to us in 2006 or thereabouts. And he told me a couple of weeks ago, we have some of the best technicians and maintenance people in our Coast Guard in keeping those radars up. In fact, it worked very well this morning for us to track what went on in Las Cuevas. I started off today meeting with the Chief of Defense Staff and some of his officers, and that was one of the areas we discussed. How can we better secure the maritime areas? Again, fishermen, tell your families, this is the general area I'm going to fish in. If you have communications, tell them where you are, go out in groups and this type of thing. We are going to do what we can, but it is a mass expense of water. So the other day when I was in Cedrus, I decided to use one of the interceptors that was coming back up to Port of Spain for them to give me a little bit of a practical idea of how big the Gulf is and how difficult that can be to man, and the amount of rigs that we have out there, small rigs and these types of things. We are going to do the best we can, but just be careful and give the information to your family. As I said, this is the general area and this type of thing.
Surveillance on a regular basis, would that be easier than sort of
They're different.
via...
So yes, we are looking at the use of technology, for example, drone technology. So you don't have to have manned aerial surveillance. These are the types of things that we are looking at.
Just in terms of the helicopters, the military type helicopters that were grounded, the Prime Minister did say there was a cost involved in terms of maintenance. But a tragedy such as what had occurred with the fishermen, would that give the government any sort of cause to review that decision?
But as I said, it didn't prevent us on this occasion from ensuring we had aerial surveillance going on. We use the NHSL helicopters, we got them out there with trained personnel. We were also using our C-26 aircraft because a plane can stay up in the air much longer than a helicopter, and it has specific equipment to do surveillance and this type of thing. Also, the upgrade to the radar system I spoke about last week will also give us some extra capability in this instance.
Says those helicopters are not military type helicopters.
But
for the
a military type helicopter is how you spec the interior of the helicopter, and the training of the pilots is the same helicopters that will be used. So what I'm looking at is an air unit that will service both the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, National Security, and the Trinidad and Tobago Air Guard will be in charge of it, so the TTDF, and we're currently looking at bringing that back on stream.
Minister Cox, not to leave you out with the gentleman. Some concerns coming to the news there. Issues with, well, we know TCT is now under your portfolio. You say that for the year they'll be getting late payment, the employees at TTT, other than 2 months where they raised the issue, where it's brought to light. Are you aware of it? And if so,
let's go to Minister Young.
Well, Minister Young, as a former communication minister, you might be able to whisper in your ear.
You all are being particularly unfair to... I realize you all are being particularly unfair to Minister Cox. As I said on a previous occasion, That was news to me as I sat here immediately upon hearing about it, and Ms. Cozier can bear this out. I immediately made sure that is rectified, and I'm certain that my colleague will do the exact same thing. If that is in fact true, Minister Cox now will do what she needs to do.
I would check on it though. I'm supposed to meet with TTT board next week. I'll follow it up. I am now the Minister of Communication, and I'm taking it one day at a time.
Thank you.
Just want to say thank you all very much, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Do remember to stay with us for tonight's show, Real Talk with Saieed Ali, which will be live at 7 p.m. via our Facebook page at Real Talk with Saieed Ali and our YouTube page at TT Real Talk. We would also be live via Synergy Entertainment Television, so do stay with us. Thank you.